What if the truth could set you free, but only after you were gone? What if proof of your innocence came too late for you to ever see daylight again? This is the story of Raymond Harris, a man who spent more than half his life behind bars for a crime that never happened. A man who trusted a system that broke him, and a truth that came one sunrise too late. It's a story about a father, a daughter, a forgotten piece of evidence, and the DNA test that whispered what the world refused to hear.
Chapter 1, The Night of the Crime. It was a humid July evening in 1994, the kind of Texas night that smells like gasoline and rain. At 11:38 p.m., a call came in from a grocery store parking lot in Denton. A woman down, possibly dead. Her name was Megan Ellis, 22 years old, a college student working the night shift to pay tuition. When officers arrived, they found her behind the store's dumpster, bruised, lifeless, her name tag still pinned to her shirt. A robbery gone wrong, they said. Fear rippled through the small town like electricity. Within hours, the search for a suspect began. A witness said they saw a man in a blue jacket running down Maple Street. That was enough for the police to decide who they wanted. And 3 blocks away, living in a small apartment with his wife Janet and 6-year-old daughter Sophie, was Raymond Harris, a mechanic, quiet, friendly, and yes, he owned a blue jacket. By sunrise, his name was on their list. By noon, he was in handcuffs. Chapter 2, The Interrogation. The room was small and gray, the air heavy and stale. Raymond had been awake for nearly 20 hours when Detective Halverson walked in, a broad man with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much. "Just tell us what happened, Ray," the detective said softly, his voice calm but his posture predatory. Raymond didn't know what to say. He hadn't been near that store. He'd been home with Janet, fixing the TV while his daughter slept. But when he said that, they shook their heads. They told him they had his fingerprints. They didn't. They said a witness picked him out of a lineup they hadn't. They said his wife was being questioned, that she might be charged too. She wasn't. The hours bled together. The light never dimmed. By the 14th hour, exhaustion won. They pushed a statement in front of him and told him to sign if he wanted to go home. He signed. That single stroke of ink became his death sentence. Chapter 3, The Trial. The trial took less than a week. The prosecution painted him as violent, unstable, and desperate. They showed the jury a hair found on the victim's shirt, a possible match to Raymond. The science was shaky, but it sounded certain. The defense tried to request DNA testing. The court denied it. Too expensive, unnecessary. When the verdict came, the courtroom was silent. Guilty, Janet screamed. Sophie cried into her grandmother's lap. Raymond stood, trembling, as the bailiff placed chains around his wrists. He turned to Janet and whispered, "Tell Sophie I didn't do it." The gavel fell, and in that sound, an innocent man's life shattered. Chapter 4, The Lost Years. Prison became Raymond's universe, a place where time didn't move, it dissolved. He woke before dawn, folded laundry, mopped floors, and learned to disappear. He wrote letters every night, to lawyers, to reporters, to anyone who would listen. Most came back unopened. Some never came back at all. Janet tried to stay strong, but poverty and grief are a slow poison. By the time Sophie turned 10, her mother was gone, swallowed by depression and addiction. Sophie went into foster care. For years, all she knew of her father was a voice through a prison phone. And still, Raymond held on. He memorized case law, copied passages from legal books, and told every guard who listened the truths and evidence. They just haven't looked yet. But no one ever did, until one man stumbled onto his file. Chapter 5, The Discovery. In 2005, in a dusty university law clinic in Austin, a young student named Eric Lawson pulled 5 old case files from a shelf. He was told to study why they had failed. One file caught his eye, State of Texas versus Raymond Harris. The photos were faded. The evidence logs were incomplete. But there in the back of a folder, Eric noticed something odd, a line in an inventory sheet that read, "Hair sample, locker number 7. The reports had said the evidence was lost. Yet here it was, sitting in storage, forgotten. Eric filed a motion for DNA testing. The request bounced between offices for months. The evidence was too old, they said. Contaminated, they said, but he didn't stop. In 2008, the court finally approved testing. The evidence was sent to the state lab. The sample was small, a single strand, but it held a story waiting to be heard. Chapter 6, The Truth in the Blood. April 2009. The lab technician leaned over the computer monitor as the peaks appeared on the DNA graph. The results were undeniable. The hair didn't belong to Raymond Harris. It matched another man, Lyle Peterson, already serving time in another state for a similar assault. Eric Lawson stared at the report in disbelief. The truth had been there all along, locked in a drawer for 15 years. He called the court. The judge scheduled a hearing. The release order was drafted. Freedom was days away, but time had other plans. Chapter 7, The Collapse. October 21st, 2009. It was breakfast hour in the prison cafeteria. Raymond stood in line, tray in hand. Then, without warning, he stumbled. The tray hit the floor. His knees buckled. Guards rushed forward. CPR was performed. The intercom crackled with emergency codes. But his heart had been beating against walls for too long. At 5:42 a.m., Raymond Harris was pronounced dead. Cause of death, cardiac arrest. 3 hours later, the fax machine in the warden's office whirred to life. A sheet of paper slid out, still warm from the machine. Order release, Raymond Harris. Freedom had arrived, but the man it belonged to was gone. Chapter 8, The Daughter's Stand. The headlines read, DNA proves innocence, too late. Reporters gathered outside the courthouse. Cameras flashed as a young woman stepped forward, holding a framed photograph. It was Sophie Harris, now 21. Her skin glowed with quiet strength. Her hazel eyes burned with grief and fire. "My father died waiting for the truth to matter," she said. Her voice trembled, but her resolve did not. The world listened. For the first time, Raymond Harris wasn't just an inmate number. He was a man, a father, a human being who had been forgotten. Chapter 9, Reform Born from Pain. Sophie refused to let his story end there. With the help of Eric Lawson and the Innocence Project, she created the Harris Foundation, an organization dedicated to preserving and testing DNA evidence in old cases. For years, she spoke to lawmakers, journalists, and victims' families. Her persistence paid off. In 2015, the Harris DNA Reform Act was signed into Texas law, requiring mandatory evidence preservation and fast-track DNA testing in felony cases. At the signing ceremony, Sophie stood beside the governor, holding her father's photo. Cameras flashed. Her eyes welled up, but she didn't smile. Justice had come, but not in time. Chapter 10, The Real Killer. In a maximum security prison hundreds of miles away, Lyle Peterson sat across from a camera crew. He was 48 now, pale, square-jawed, short sandy brown hair, blue eyes flat as ice. When asked about Raymond Harris, he shrugged. "Not my fault I got the wrong guy," he said. "No guilt, no remorse." His smirk became the face of a system that had lost its soul. Chapter 11, The Letter. Each year, Sophie visits her father's grave. The headstone reads, Raymond Harris, 1968 to 2009. He never stopped believing in the truth. She kneels beside it, unfolding a letter her father wrote years before. The ink is faded, but the words still breathe. Dear Sophie, if you ever doubt the world, find a fact and hold on. It's the only thing that can't be taken from you. She presses the letter against her heart and closes her eyes. The wind carries the sound of leaves moving, a whisper piece that took too long to arrive.
Raymond Harris never walked out of prison, but his story broke the walls for others. Because of him, evidence is tested, lives are spared, and justice moves a little faster. But how many more wait for a truth still trapped in a locker, collecting dust? Sometimes justice doesn't roar, it whispers. And sometimes that whisper comes too late. This is Justice Uncovered, uncovering the truth one case at a time. If you believe stories like this need to be heard, backhand index pointing right, subscribe, share, and let's make sure no one's truth dies unheard.